Hi, welcome. This is a webinar format, so I don't see your lovely faces, which is not what I'm more used to seeing people, so it's a little challenging for me. But you're going to help me by being super interactive and sending lots of questions and thoughts and reactions in the chat box, right? Thanks. You can test that out already by putting something in the chat box, say hi and where you're logging in from. I also wanted to just orient that if there is a siren or a hatra, I will say I am getting a hatra or a siren and close and come back when it's over and continue from there. So you're welcome to follow along with me with that. So somebody share that from Yerushalayim. Anybody else? I see a lot of Elazar. Cool. If you're just coming on now, people are sharing where they're logging on from, just to give me a little bit more of a sense of who I'm talking to. Somebody asked, where's the chat box? You are messaging me in it, so I appreciate it. I know it does look a little bit different on the webinar format. That's why I'm asking to send me something because I'm not used to this format as much. Um, someone said outskirts of Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim. Beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate just giving me a little input. Yeah, so if you have any questions about that. So you can there's like a Q&A section um on the bottom, I think on the bottom of your screen. That's what I have. And you can submit questions there. I want questions. I invite questions. I might sometimes say, like, you know what, let's hold that for the end. Another Yerushalayim, another Yerushalayim. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Okay. So without further ado, let's get into our class. Um, okay, someone's logging in from America, but they have grandchildren in Eretz Yisrael in Telmond. Telmond. Yeah, it's a webinar format. I know not that's not like a typical Zoom format, so it's a little bit different. So you're not able to just come off mute. Um, um, but you can put questions in the Q&A box, and I'm happy to answer them, and I will want your input. So please do share. Okay. I'm gonna save time at the end for like questions that you want answered. Um, but anything along the way, no, you're not, no, nobody can see anybody except me. So hopefully that's helpful and keeps us focused on track. Somebody asked, are being seen? Okay. So I'm going to jump into the class. Feel free to send questions, thoughts, reactions along the way. And I'm going to save time, like a dedicated time at the end for like a more formal question and answer. So if there's something that's like a more formal question that's not like along with the class, so feel free to save it for the end, or post it and hope I remember for the end. Okay. I wanted to just start off with a few points for ourselves. First of all, first of all, what's very, very necessary at this time, right now, in what's going on in the situation in Eretz Yisrael, you must be validating yourself. This is like if I had to give you all a prescription for tonight, that would be you must be validating yourself, not because you deserve self-compassion and like we all need to just fill up our own cups. I'm not trying to put that down. I just find that sometimes doesn't speak to me because it feels like, okay, yeah, that's a good idea if I had time or energy or like or whatever. It sounds good, but like why? And I'm telling you that you absolutely need to. Like this is like required. This is necessary. Because if you don't like pause and validate how much you're going through, how challenging this is, how stressful this is, how anxiety provoking this is, for yourself, you will not have emotional bandwidth to do that for anybody else. So that is my first prescription for everybody here, is that you must be doing that. You must be doing that. Second of all, I also am going to highly, highly suggest that you congratulate yourself for all of your beautiful accomplishments over the last, I think we're getting close to 2 weeks, but I've lost a little bit of sense of time, so I may be off. So you must congratulate yourself. I know that you, every single one of you, have had massive wins over the last 2 weeks, massive moments with your kids or with yourself where you really had like a growth point, or where you really have like done something beautiful for yourself, for your family, and you must be congratulating yourself on that, because if you're not congratulating yourself on that, it will be hard to sustain. You will feel like you're not getting anywhere, and you will feel like you're not doing amazing, and that will make it much harder for you to have more wins. Somebody's asking, what does validation sound or look like? So validation, just briefly, because I could talk for like 6 days about validation. Validation is a communication of you make sense. So when you're trying to validate somebody else, you have to essentially say you make sense, and that has to land. Like they have to actually believe you. So for yourself, it's a little bit easier, but not necessarily, because lots of people self-validate but don't really buy it. Like, oh, I'm working so hard. This is so challenging, but like roll my eyes. Like I should be doing better. I should be doing better, right? Um, and that's not real validation. It's not going to work. Okay, so what you do need to do is actually convince yourself that you make perfect sense, that your responses are just as legitimate and normal as everybody else's, even if you feel that yours are more extreme or more intense or more whatever, or your situation is more whatever. You have to convince yourself, Chaya Lieba said, that you make so much perfect sense, and if anybody else were to walk into your home, they would see you managing and they would be like, wow, this is so much. And wow, you're amazing. So validation is the side of, this is so much. I see how challenging this is. It's like focused on the challenge, on the difficulty, on the things that aren't going great, and how much that makes sense, versus congratulating yourself or complimenting yourself or praising yourself is about focusing on what you're doing well. And you actually need both. And I don't say this always to every talk that I give. I don't start with this. These are important principles in life and whatever, but I don't always start with that. But I felt that for this talk, this is really, really important, because nothing else, I feel pretty clear and pretty confident to say that nothing else I'm going to teach you is going to work if you're not doing these two things first, because we only can operate so much from a sense of I should, or from a place of like guilt for our kids. We can only operate so much from a place of guilt, without it coming across, without it not landing properly, without it being obvious. The way that it truly will actually work and be sustainable is if you are first and foremost validating and congratulating yourself. So I hope I've convinced you, you must on a constant basis. I give you a prescription here for 100 times a day. Be saying, wow, it makes so much sense that I'm so overwhelmed. It makes so much sense that I'm stressed out. Of course I am losing my mind. Of course I feel completely whatever it is. Okay. Um, exhausted out of my brains, whatever it is, okay? And I'm doing amazing. I had cleaned anything at all for Pesach, and my kids were happy for some of the time today. And there was this moment when we actually like managed well and came together. So like this is great, right? We're going to be so happy and thrilled about all this. So you must be doing those two things. The third thing, which I don't know if it's required, I'm not saying it as a requirement, I'm saying it as my personal experience of what has been speaking to me also, is appreciating the fortune we have to be going through these times. Somebody put it like this to me, and it really resonated with me, is imagine if like 200 years ago, somebody would have told your great grandparents that their great grandchildren would be living in Eretz Yisrael, going through a war, and like all they have to do is like go to this room in their house or down, okay, it could be down the stairs in a building, that can be definitely more stressful, and they're pretty much staying safe majority of the time. This is like mind blowing. Okay. um so we're just experiencing such fortunate, beautiful, amazing times, and there's what to like enjoy here. And so you could be coming from a place of like poor us, and I think that that can get really down. And so really like the congratulating yourself, I know as a psychologist, very critical, but also enjoying, finding what to enjoy and be appreciative of here can, I think, be extremely valuable. Okay, now let's talk about anxiety. So, anxiety is a really important emotion, and we're going to be focusing in on it today because anxiety is the emotion that is most relevant for danger. And since there is true danger, it's extremely relevant here. So, anxiety is an emotion. Sometimes I hear people say, like, I have anxiety. What they mean by that is I have an anxiety disorder. But anxiety is actually an emotion. Anxiety is an emotion that we all experience. Every single human experiences it. In fact, if you don't have the emotion of anxiety, you will likely die because anxiety is what protects us. Its job is to motivate us to protect ourselves from danger. And so you need it. You need anxiety. And when there is true danger, anxiety is fantastically helpful. So if there is a true danger, let's say, let's say there's a tsunami, right? That's not something I've experienced. So let's say there's a tsunami and I'm on the beach and I see that the water is going up, up, up. And I say, oh no, there's a tsunami. My heart rate starts going to pump blood quicker around my body. The non vital functions in my body start to slow down and the vital functions start to pick up. My pupils dilate to take in more information. Um, my maybe I start shaking to warm my body up to prepare myself to fight off this attack or run away from this tsunami. And front part of my brain that helps with like decision making or like thinking about bigger picture problems goes offline, but my very basic automatic functioning of my brain is on high alert, tells me what to do. We got to get out of here. Oh my gosh, there's a tsunami. Ah, it alerts the people around me and we start running. Maybe somebody comes and helps us because we've been alerted by my very efficient and effective, helpful yelling. So all this response to this true danger is extremely, extremely helpful, right? Adrenaline kicks in and all that actually like floods my body with the ability to run faster, to protect myself even better, to be stronger, to do what I need to do to escape from the danger. And that fear response is fantastic and it's super, super, super helpful when there is true danger. Now, majority of the time, we're not being attacked by tsunamis, but we all experience anxiety in various forms regardless. Now, sometimes there is some true danger and we experience more anxiety than is helpful. And sometimes there's no true danger and we experience anxiety. What we all do pretty much. I mean, maybe somebody's going to chime in here and be like, no, 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 my husband, you haven't met him. But majority of people experience some unhelpful anxiety some of the time. Some people experience it to a degree that's really getting in the way of their lives. And that's where we would call that an anxiety disorder. That's an oversimplification. I'm not want anybody diagnosing anybody out of this, but that's the basic gist um, is that that we all experience anxiety, both helpful and unhelpful to varying degrees. Well, helpful is a basic human response, but unhelpful to varying degrees. If it reaches a point where it's really disrupting our lives and creating dysfunction, that's where somebody would have an anxiety disorder. But regardless, that doesn't actually matter. The point is that it can be unhelpful or helpful. And we want to try and get our emotions to be as helpful for us as possible. So, so where do I want to go next with that? So yeah, I was planning to start talking about stress here, but I feel like there's more I want to say about anxiety first. How do we teach ourselves to not have unhelpful responses to anxiety? The way we teach ourselves to not have unhelpful responses is by going through with the thing that we're afraid of and giving our brain and body a chance to experience that there is no true danger. So when there's a tsunami, then there's actually a tsunami. We actually run away, and the brain learns tsunamis are very dangerous. We need to be able to produce that response again next time because that was very protective. But if there was no actual tsunami, let's say I had a tsunami 3 years ago, and now I want to go to the beach with my family, and I go to the beach and my heart starts pumping, and my thoughts kind of like narrow down. I just start thinking, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I start getting like really just feeling really nervous. That response would make a lot of sense. Of course, I had this tsunami years ago, right? And that anxiety would obviously be unhelpful because there's not a true tsunami going on right now, right? And so what we want to do is give our brain and body a chance to kind of catch up to this new information. Because I can tell myself there's no tsunami, there's no tsunami, there's no tsunami. Unfortunately, because remember I said that during that actual danger, the front part of the brain that like thinks for us, that's like responsible for higher order thinking, shuts down, and we go from that really basic automatic responding. So because that's the case, um, when we then have another beach experience, we can't just think it's just a beach. Usually there's not tsunamis. We can't just tell ourselves that and automatically understand it. Sometimes that works enough, but for a lot of us, for a lot of the time, it's not like that. For example, very relevant to our times, you can tell yourself 100 million times that that beeping noise out of your phone, it just means that a siren is coming or that a siren is happening, and I don't need to like literally jump out of my shoes. But that is a very automatic response. Not only because it's just a very alarming noise, but also because we've come to associate it with as a coat. And so, yes, it's very alarming for that reason. But it also could just be alarming just because it's very very loud. And there's been many jokes going around about it. And I'm hoping Picodorf is going to pick up on the jokes and change the sound. But until then, we're waiting for a contact over there. Um, but that aside, that was just a good example of where it's normal for our body to have that response, even without a hatra, even without that very blaring noise. An azaka goes off. It's not a very aggressive, intense noise, but it's normal that I always find that there's this little rise, a little rise in me. And I wish I didn't have that little rise. I know what to do in azaka. I'm not afraid of an azaka. I know what to do. I know, it's not usually so bad, right? And still every time that little wave, totally normal. And that's our body's response because of past learning. And the way that we can have new learning is by going through or having opportunities to be in the same experience without anything happening. So, for example, if somebody when it's a first azaka after there's been a long period of not having any, it's really normal that first time or that second time there's a bit of a bigger like, oh my gosh, because we're not so used to it. But when it's been happening very frequently, it's a little more normal for us to kind of like get used to it in a way. And that getting used to it experience is really your brain and body catching up on the information of azaka means we're going to go to this room and we're going to hang out there a little bit. It doesn't usually have to mean so intense. It could, but it doesn't have to be. Um, okay, so I think that's what I want to say about anxiety, but feel free to chime in because I could talk about anxiety for 6 years. Oh, here, great question. Great that there is a question. What about when it's the physical feeling of anxiety, but without a specific fear to go through? So that's what I was saying with my example of me personally, when there's nazaka, that first woo, I have this internal like little rise that I've noticed. It's a physiological sensation I have. It's not a thought. I'm not afraid of the azaka, so I can't just talk myself out of it. It's more of like if I would just sit and play that noise all day long, probably I would regulate a little bit better. And I probably should do that. That would be helpful. Tip for later when I have lots and lots of time to myself. So I hope that answers that. But yeah, there's so much more I could say about anxiety. So if anybody has any questions that would help clarify that more, I'm happy to answer. I did want to also just talk about stress. And I like to just clarify that the emotions boil down to very specific ways of operating. And so I don't like to call like a lot of different things of one emotion. So it's not that there's anxiety and stress and nerves and worry and like that they actually mean something different. They really all boil down to the same biological process of experiencing fear. So stress is obviously a very low version of fear, but it's still related to the same issue. I see more questions came in. I'm going to just finish my point and then I'll come back to them. So stress is just important to acknowledge because right now I think like everybody is under a lot of stress. If I'm going based on myself, we are under a lot of stress. And it's really, really hard to unbury ourselves, right? All the things that I would usually suggest are really like not so options right now, right? There's really the issue of things are really closed. There are really kids home all the time, and there really is Pesach coming. Like that is all just like the way it is, right? And that has to be dealt with, and that is stressful. So some things that can help with reducing stress, to me, I think the most important thing is creating structure. Creating structure gives a flow to the day. It tells people what to expect. As helpful as that's super, super helpful for majority of children, will really benefit from knowing what to expect when. But guess what? Majority of adults will also really, really, really benefit from knowing what to expect when. Um, It has to be with flexibility, I find, right? I just get a call in the middle of the day that like in an hour the school is opening and the teacher is going to be giving out whatever package for Pesach, because obviously there's no expectation that we're going back, right? Sorry, kidding. Don't mean to trigger anybody too bad here. But those kinds of things happen. There's an option to go have an activity, this afternoon, and we're just telling you about it now. So there has to be some flexibility. That's true. Or you had this great plan and there's a siren and now we're in the mamad and now our plan gets thrown off. There has to be flexibility, which honestly is a fantastic thing to teach your kids anyway. So it builds that skill. I'm not opposed to building the skill of flexibility, but the structure gives a flow to the day. It gives people a sense of what's happening when, and it also hopefully, if you structure your day well, if you create a good structure out of this, and I'll Bezrat Hashem send my personal family schedule on the chat when I finish talking, so you can see mine. But and you should create your own. Very very highly recommended homework from today. One of the great things about creating a structure is that it hopefully forces certain like biological rhythms that are really important for us. And I'm particularly talking about sleep. Sleep is really hard to get enough of these days. Really, really, really hard, especially if you work and have your kids home all day. And yeah, so this and sometimes in the middle of the night, it's really hard to get enough sleep. And so putting into the schedule when we're sleeping can be, and even having like a nap time or a quiet time, even if your kids are bigger or most of your kids are bigger, just putting it, slotting in that quiet time of the day, I think can be really, really helpful in like even just a potential time for having a nap or for having in your schedule when sleep is happening, can just help force that, because it's really easy to stay up later because there's no school and then sleep in but not sleep in enough and then everyone's thrown off. It's just really, really helpful to have that structure in place. My family personally, we're sticking with our regular sleep schedule, and that's good for us. That's not necessarily good for every family. It probably is great for some families to sleep in, but just making sure that enough healthy sleep is happening is really, really important. Meals, put meals into your calendar. Having a couple meals a day, 2 to 3 meals per day. I know there's whatever, but having a few meals slotted into your day at particular times that are predictable really forces, instead of like random arbitrary snacking all day, can force in a little bit of structure around eating, which is really helpful. Hydrating is really helpful, really important, and can be helpful to put into your rhythm or to your structure. Daily movement, get outside, get somewhere, do something with your body, really, really helpful, really important. And socializing, if you can put that into your structure. I'm noticing that it's hard to make that happen because it's hard to think of when everyone's around. It's hard to think of like, okay, how do we make socializing happen? But that can be a really, really important thing to make happen somehow, is at least some people connect with some people a few times a day is important. So that's like my first and most important tip for reducing stress is structure, create structure. And then the second one is what I call emotion vitamins. I don't want to go too deep into this subject because there is a focus of today's talk, and this is all preliminary stuff. So we're building up, we're getting there. But emotion vitamins are very, very important. I know we have a blog post on our website about emotion vitamins, so you can definitely read more about it there. And we have a handout on our website about emotion vitamins, so there's more places you can read about it. But emotion vitamins is basically my term for the way that we build up capacity to handle stress. So if you have like this much capacity and there's this much stress, then you have no capacity. If you have this much capacity and this much stress, then that's great. You got a lot of wiggle room, right? But if you've got this much capacity and this much stress, then there's no wiggle room. If you've got this much capacity, you've got this much stress, then you're probably going to explode. So emotion vitamins expand our capacity. What are some examples of emotion vitamins? Those are things like number one, I think of like the first section in my head is the things I was saying before. Regular eating, regular as much as possible, sleeping, regular movement, really like those are very, very critical. There's more I could say on that, but I'll leave it at that. And then additionally, helpful emotion vitamins are making pleasant things happen. and doing things that give us a sense of accomplishment and doing things that are aligned with our values. So I know I'm just saying that briefly, but making sure that those kinds of things, that there's positive experiences, right? I know a lot of families, when they go to a mamad, they bring a snack or they say Tehillim all together or they sing together or they dance together. These are all really great ways. I'm not recommending any one, right strategy. But these are great ways of building our capacity. Like, okay, know that this is going to be a positive experience that builds our capacity to handle stress. Okay, now let's talk about our topic for today, which is anxiety beyond the regular. So, unless you made Aliyah recently, which if you did, congratulations on your first war. That was what my kids said before the first siren. They said, "Oh, it's this kid's first war." So that, that's kind of sad, but for some people who are new olim, this is your first war. It's just intense. And for a majority of people who have been here longer than that, there was initial probably anxiety from every child to a degree. And at this point, probably, I'm assuming, or this is what I'm seeing or what I'm hearing, majority, oh, you know what? I wanted to let me just see if any of these questions I should go back to. I'm going to come back to these questions. I'm going to come back to these questions. These are like more anxiety specific questions. I'll come back to them. Okay. So I'm going to move into anxiety beyond the regular. So if it's your first experience of this, so then every anxiety is expected because it is fresh and new. If this is ongoing, what I'm hearing is that families are seeing that either there's a kid who has pre-existing anxiety who that's obviously translating in this experience, or it's a kid who the rest of the family is kind of like, okay, like obviously this is a very intense time, but this is not particularly new, or I mean, it's new because it's got its own facets, but we've experienced missiles, we've experienced sirens, we've experienced missing school. It's intense and it's overwhelming, but it's not particularly like massively overwhelming. And then there might be one kid who is still really struggling, really afraid. And so that's the kid I want to focus on today. So it's either a kid with pre-existing anxiety issues or a kid who's just not regulating to the stressor in the way that we would expect them to. Again, not that there's anything regular about the stressor, and everybody is probably anxious to some degree, but there's something a little bit beyond with this kid. So my first most important thing I think with this kid is first to take a good serious look at how are you behaving. What I would recommend, ideally, is that majority of the time, however much possible, you are calm, you are happy, you're not glued to the news, you're davening, but you're not stressed out, you're not like carrying around an anxiety. Now, if you are, if you can, this is where I would recommend trying to either deal with that as quickly as you can, or if that's possible, if you're in therapy and you can focus that therapy on this right now, this would be really important. If you want to like download a mindfulness app or find some kind of like mantra that helps you, or read a book about this, that's what I recommend. Really focus in on this issue right now, because this is the best service you can do for your family, is to work on your own anxiety. That's number one. If for whatever reason it's not, faking it in this case, I think is probably advisable. I know that sounds, but like, meaning this is if you're experiencing anxiety that's beyond what I was talking about, beyond that like helpful and appropriate and like within reason anxiety, and you're aware of that and you're not able to work on it right now, then yeah, hiding that a little bit as much as you can from your kids is important, because you want them to see healthy coping. Now, that said, I feel like terrible saying that because sorry, but that's the truth, is that your kids really pick up on so much. And so some stress and anxiety at the same time is healthy and helpful to share with kids, because if you and this is what I see a big mistake a lot of parents make, is thinking that they have to show that their kids that they never get anxious, or, and I see this in general, not related to this war in particular, but parents who try to like never show like difficult emotions in front of their kids, like never get angry, never be upset, never be stressed out, at least not in front of the children. And the downside of that is that there's a massive downside of that, which is that children don't learn how to cope with emotions, because my parents just don't have any, and I'm just clearly like flawed. I'm just clearly like bad, or there's something wrong with me that I have these emotions. And so we actually want to show children adaptively that all humans have emotions, and emotions are totally normal and safe and healthy. And here's what we do when we want to change them or reduce them or work with them or support ourselves through them. Here's what we can do. And so modeling your own emotion regulation, your own management of your own emotions, and showing that you have emotions, that you feel stressed. And I'm gonna here differentiate between anxiety and stress, saying like, "Ooh, I got a little nervous there." Like I had in a recent siren. I thought I thought that my husband wasn't in the house anymore, and he actually was, and he had walked off with one of the kids, and I didn't realize it. And I was scrambling, looking around for this kid, and that, whoa, that brought up anxiety. So when we all got into the mamad, I said to my family, whoa, I felt really anxious when I didn't know where this kid was. um and that's helpful. I think, I hope that's helpful and healthy modeling of anxiety. um, and separate from that, stress, I'm going to call stress here just the stress of everyone's in my space, everyone's not me all the time. There's not like, okay, yeah, we have our structure for the day, but yes, I'm not going to school during the day. And so parents sharing your stress in reasonable and healthy ways of like, wow, it's really overwhelming when you're tapping me and tapping me and tapping me, and this one's talking at the same time. That's really overwhelming for me. If you see somebody else is talking to me, can you hold off a second? That really gives a very good modeling for a child that adults get stressed and they can like ask for what they want. But there can be other ways of handling stress. Wow, I'm really stressed out. I'm gonna like take five, or I'm gonna get a drink of water. So modeling your management of stress is supremely helpful and healthy. So while I was saying before that, like if you're experiencing anxiety to like an unhealthy degree, like we were talking about before, like in a way where it's really disruptive to you, to your life, that I would try to mask a little bit from your kids, because you don't want them having that kind of modeling. So if the more you can invest in taking care of your own anxiety, that will be the best thing for your kids. Like that is what I would say is like the most healthy, helpful first thing that you can do is to take care of your own anxiety. And if it's in a range that is helpful, that is like healthy, helpful to a degree, then sharing that and modeling your own coping is so helpful for children. Particularly, for example, when there's a siren, you can, I would suggest, calmly walk, not run, wherever possible. Obviously, if there's a need, but walking whenever possible. And then davening, but also singing and playing games and enjoying time together, like also doing other things that demonstrate that it's not always so heavy, is really important. And so it doesn't have to be that every time it's this way. And sometimes you could just like do nothing is also fine, or just chit chat is also fine, but demonstrating lightness for enough of the time is really critical. Another important thing is just to talk through, like when a child says, I feel, let's say a kid says something like, I feel nervous to, run this errand that I typically would run. Yeah, I want to pick up a book from a neighbor. I typically, let's say this is a kid who typically would go on this errand, no problem. But now they're feeling nervous to go out of the house. What if there's a hatch around and I don't know about it? So or what if there's an as I come while I'm outside? So it's really helpful to talk this through. And we're gonna get to this in a moment, how to have these kinds of conversations, but just talking through the idea that sirens themselves are not dangerous. They're signals that something dangerous could happen. And so they're telling us, therefore, go to a safe space as best as you can. So we want to, so therefore, and this is an important dot to connect for children, because they don't always connect this. Adults don't sometimes either, but particularly for children, very important to connect the dots here. If we hear the signal, we don't need to feel afraid because the signal is not dangerous. We need to listen to the signal, what it's telling us to do. And then we can know like we did the best thing we could do. Now, obviously, we can't make sure bad things can never happen, right? So it's not that we went from Mamad and therefore nothing bad ever going to happen. And so it's therefore, it's going to mean that like, if you're going walking and then you're not near Mamad right away and you have to, improvise, go into a building or whatever, that can be okay. Um, but the important thing for children and adults, but children to understand is that the signal is not dangerous. right? What the signal is trying to tell me is dangerous. And so I don't have to be afraid of the signal. I just have to pay attention to the signal and listen to what it's telling me to do. I like to connect these dots, especially because kids often also, especially kids who tend more anxious, tend to take a lot of responsibility for danger. So, for example, let's say a kid. I'm going to think of an example that I know of with a okay. So a kid who is anxious about um, the parents let the kids not wear a seatbelt when they're just trying to like pick up that's like a couple blocks away, let's say, for example. And but usually if they leave those few blocks radius, everyone of course has to wear a seatbelt. And so this child, when the kids weren't wearing a seatbelt driving to school pickup, this child was super anxious. And so what I worked with the parents to talk to the child about is that your responsibility is not to decide what is dangerous or not as the child, and this is also gone over in the children's book we have on our website. Michal asks Ima about sirens. We talk about this idea there also about how to have this conversation about sirens in particular. But your responsibility as a child is not to protect yourself or your family from danger. Your responsibility is to listen to Ima and Abba. That's your responsibility. That's how you protect yourself from danger. Best is by listening to Ima and Abba as a child. There comes a point where that changes. And I would argue that it's not in adulthood, it's really in teenagehood that children accept responsibility for their own safety. But children are not responsible for their safety. They're not responsible for deciding whether wearing a seatbelt for the family going to school is safe or dangerous. They're responsible for listening to Imanaba. And so very simple, this is very, very significant when it comes to sirens, is Imanaba will tell you what to do. Or sometimes I tell my kids, like, look around what the adults around you are doing. If I know we're going to be separated for a few minutes, look around what the other adults around you are doing, and that's where you'll go. So the point of me sharing that was just the idea, understanding the idea that connecting the dots, that the siren is not dangerous. I have to listen to what siren's telling me. This is very connected to children also understanding and offloading the burden of responsibility for their own safety or for their family's safety. Children who tend more anxious tend to take a lot of responsibility for their safety or for other people's safety, and they're not responsible for safety. Actually, they can't be responsible for that because they're children. And guess what? Adults can't either be responsible for that. We have to come to terms with that as well, but children have to come to terms with their lack of responsibility for their safety because their parents are in charge and they are not capable of making themselves safe. And so this is just important dots to connect. But most important is to understand that you are modeling how to respond through every single thing that you do. Okay, the second most important thing, if you've done all that, the second most important, like in terms of how you are behaving, the second most important thing is having open conversations about fear. So if you're noticing a child getting more anxious, I would open a conversation with them. I'm noticing that and I would not use the word anxious or anxiety. I would say, I noticed that whenever there's a siren, you start crying, or whatever their response is, or that you only want to be near me in the Chadar Mamad, and asking them how they feel about that or what's going on here. And I think that is a good way to open the conversation and start. And that's kind of all that's needed. And just finding some kind of opening that makes sense. How do you feel about sirens? How do you feel about school being canceled? How do you feel about Pesach coming? How do you feel about everyone being home? Just kind of asking some open-ended questions. It really doesn't matter where you start per se, as long as you make the child feel comfortable enough to share a little bit of what's on their mind. The trouble with kids, adults too, but trouble with kids is that some kids or a lot of kids, maybe the majority of kids, don't necessarily yet have the language always to describe their problems. And so it's our responsibility as parents to give children language, and it does not have to be overly complicated. So I know a lot of times people go a little overboard, I would say, with explaining or teaching about emotions to children. It really does not have to be complicated. You can take like 5 emojis and put like the word of the emotion under it and put it on the fridge, and congratulations, you've taught your child about how to talk about emotions. But now you have to connect the dots for them and say, oh, when that happened, I was feeling really scared. Oh, this happened. I'm feeling so this the dinner spilled on the floor. I'm feeling so sad. So demonstrating a little bit to give a little, connect those words with the experience for them so they understand, because this can help give them language. Just checking the chat box. Yeah, I'm definitely taking questions. Some questions that are sent during, I'll answer during, but majority I'm going to save for the end for like a dedicated question answer time. So if it's like directly relevant to what I'm saying, please send now. Okay, so yeah, so open up an open conversation, right? I notice that when there's a siren, sometimes you start crying, or I notice that sometimes when we go to the Khanamad, you want to only be near me. Yes, a recording will be sent to anybody who's on our email list. If you're not, I'll send that information after. If I don't, please remind me at this point. So I'm realizing I just had a lot of things I'm going to do, and I got to remember all those while I'm talking. So if I don't do something that I said I would do, please just remind me to do it, and I'll do it. Okay, so opening up the conversation in some kind of open way, like, I noticed this, what's going on for you, or do you know why you start crying, or trying to say it in a way that sounds the least bit, or at least, or like totally not at all judgmental, critical. They're not doing anything wrong. More like, I just want to understand, help me, tell me about it, tell me more about it. So some other like open-ended questions could be, how do you feel about the situation? And then I would try to give some language for emotions, keep it super simple. Like I said, fear or afraid or scared, sad, angry, happy, embarrassed. I would like leave it at that. Like really like 5, 6 emotions and talking tops. And then you could share a little bit about how anxiety works, just like how I shared with you today, right? Sometimes anxiety or feeling scared is really, really helpful, because when there's something dangerous, feeling scared tells us what to do, right? And so when there's an azakah, feeling a little scared tells you like, okay, let's get with the program. We got to go somewhere, right? We got to move it. And that's really, really helpful. Sometimes, though, a lot of the time, though, we get scared when there's either nothing to be afraid of or something to be afraid of, but we feel really scared. And so, really scared doesn't match. And so, that's going to be like a lot more than we want to feel, that's helpful for us. And so, what are ways that we can get the fear down to the helpful amount? And then, before going into problem solving, which I was talking about to do, validate their emotions. Of course, you feel scared. Everybody feels scared, right? There's rockets. Okay, there's what to be scared of. And so emotions all make sense. Emotions always make sense. We may not always understand, but they always make sense. That's the basic premise. So validate their emotions. Their emotions make perfect sense. And then explain how fear, like I started saying, how fear can be helpful or unhelpful and different amounts of fear. And then talk about strategies for reducing fear. I would keep it simple. I find that families often feel like they need a lot of new ideas. You really don't. You need 3 that your child is willing to do. 3. You also need 3 that you're willing to do, but really you don't need much more than 3. 5 is nice, but unnecessary. You really don't need so many. One simple one that I find is really nice, like it's just a nice idea and it works well for a lot of people, is creating like a comfort box or a calming box, whatever you want to call it, for the mamad. So create a box that you keep in the mamad that has, go to the shekel store, get things like squishy toys, stress balls. You can make them. My kids did this yesterday unprompted, took a bunch of balloons and filled them with flour and made smiley faces on them. Great idea. Bubbles, something that smells nice, cream, lotion, chocolate, um, even like tea bags or cinnamon sticks can smell really nice. A way to help prompt you for ideas of what to put in the box can be thinking of the 5 senses. So things that are soothing to your sense of smell or soothing to sense of touch. Maybe there's a really yummy blanket that everybody likes. You can keep that there or in the box or whatever it is, and that can be something that can be helpful, and just like a known resource. Obviously taking nice calming breaths, obviously having a sentence like Hashem loves me, Hashem's taking care of me can be helpful, but just having a few of those strategies can be really, really helpful and empowering for adults, but really for children to know I can do something when I feel amounts of fear that are not helpful. And that's what we're trying to teach them, really, is that Fear is not, I don't have to be afraid of being afraid. It's okay to be afraid. I can validate my own emotions. It makes sense that I'm afraid. And the amount that I'm feeling, the intensity that I'm feeling is not helpful. And so I can do something actively to bring it down. And so that can be really helpful. Sometimes, by the way, just having that open conversation, like I was mentioning, sometimes just that is really plenty, because just having children be able to put words on their experience, be seen, is really, can be really, really helpful. That is the end of my official information I wanted to share. I'm going to go back and answer questions now. So please put questions in the chat box. Okay. So the first question I'm seeing that I didn't answer yet is, what about if we don't have a mamad in the building? So it really is a more tense situation. How do we stay calm? So regardless of what's happened, I actually love, there was an old uh video of a very famous psychologist talking about how to be calm even in the most, even in the worst possible situation. So somebody, they were being interviewed and somebody said to them, um if what if you were in a plane that's crashing and everyone's going to die, and this person, not us, this person knows they're about to die, what would be like the ideal situation then? Like, that's terrible, right? And this person's psychological technique was essentially having people imagine themselves coping well. I'm gonna boil it down. Coping well even in their worst situation. So they said in this, they responded that if they themselves were in a plane crashing and they knew that they were about to die, they hope that they would still be calm. They hope that they would handle it well. They hope they wouldn't have to spend their last moments on earth, freaking out and being hysterical. They hope that they would be happy, or be sending like positive wishes or love wishes to the people who they care about, things like that. So that example on the side, if you really have a more intense situation of like, we actually have to get somewhere safe and it's stressful every time. So first of all, you might like try to, meaning whenever possible, to brainstorm ways of reducing stress. I would recommend if there's any way of reducing stress. But I know obviously it's not possible for everybody, and it's a massive privilege to not be in that situation. But I also want you to kind of get out of your head that therefore I have to be more anxious. Um, you have to like have a better plan or have a plan of handling, but that doesn't mean that more anxiety is going to be more helpful. Yes, it's true that when you're far away from a safe place and you have to get to a safe place and you're not immediately like easily able to get there, there is actually more to deal with. And so some more anxiety would be helpful, but not tons more anxiety. So I guess my first suggestion is, if there's any way to problem solve around being near a safer space majority of the time, that would obviously be my first recommendation. Just reduce stress wherever possible. But whatever is not possible, still just holding on to what anxiety amount is helpful, like in problem solving. Okay, where do we go? How do we get there? Right? We have to deal with this. And what amount is not serving me? It's not like keeping me any safer. I hope that answers that, but feel free to follow up. Okay. So somebody else wrote, why do we react this way if you've never actually experienced an actual missile falling next to me? First of all, we all have access, I would assume, to news, to some sort of video or picture of what damage looks like. And so, that's there. We see it, we can visualize it, and that already has an impact. Second of all, just the fact that the siren itself is like alerting you, right? It literally is telling your brain, be anxious right now. So of course your body is going to respond with, oh, we got to be anxious now, because that's what the signal is telling you. It's telling you, be anxious now, there's a danger approaching. So even if so many missiles don't fall, and so many don't fall near us, and even if we've never experienced that, it's still literally a signal telling you. When I saw a funny thing today that said, sorry if I haven't answered your email, I've been somebody's been trying to kill me 3 to 4 times a night for the past 2 weeks. And I felt like, on the one hand, like, that's kind of harsh. I don't feel like I'm, somebody's trying to kill me every night, but that is the reality, right? And so when you sit with that, their anxiety shows up, and that's normal. And that's why I was saying the importance of validating all emotions. So yes, it is kind of crazy that our body responds with such an intense response. And yes, partly it is due to the amount of like visual and auditory exposure we have to the news. But also part of it is just the understanding mentally of what an Azaka represents. What it means is that there is a rocket coming to our country trying to kill us. That is, that is going to produce an anxious response logically. Okay. Um, Sorry, next question. Yeah. So somebody asked, what can I do that I deal during the day, but getting into bed, they're feeling anxious and have trouble falling asleep. And they're trying relaxation techniques and breathing. So I will say, first of all, we have a handout on our website that talks about like what's important for creating healthy sleep even during a crisis. So I do recommend reading over that because I find that sometimes it seems logical that we need just a better relaxation idea, and it's not always about relaxation. Sleep works in very particular ways, and sometimes the things we think will be helpful is counterintuitively making it worse. And so understanding that can be really, really helpful. It's not just about relaxation techniques at all, far from it. That said, I personally find that after a hatra, I am on and it's hard to wind back down. And even just knowing that there's very logically possibly going to be a siren in the night makes it harder to wind down. So I think anybody who has ever struggled at all with their sleep, that means that there's just like a biological, this is an oversimplification, but there's probably a biological vulnerability to struggling with sleep. And when there is a massive stressor like this, even if forget about rockets a second, even just the possibility of being woken up to a very loud noise, just knowing that that might happen is just going to make you just a drop more wired enough to make it harder to wind down. That's completely understandable. That's completely logical. And I don't think there's a ton we can do about it other than try to get in bed early, try to get good quality sleep whenever possible. You can improve your quality of sleep, read over that handout, but by making sure that majority of the time in bed you are asleep. So if you're spending time in bed scrolling on your phone, that is like the worst thing you could do for your sleep quality. But even if you're lying in bed thinking, when am I going to fall asleep? When am I going to fall asleep? When am I going to fall asleep? Get out of bed, because spending time in bed not sleeping primes your brain for spending time in bed not sleeping. And so really try to reduce that as much as you can, but easier said than done. It is tricky, and just kind of have a lot of grace with yourself also. But also recognizing that the relaxation techniques are helpful, but to a point, and sleep has a lot more relevant variables than relaxation alone. Yeah. Okay. Next question is, what if there's a constant heavy feeling in the chest, shaky legs without a specific trigger? And so that is like what I was saying before. There's this physiological response to fear that goes along with fear. It's perfectly normal, and it's really not something that you can usually talk yourself out of. You can tell yourself there's nothing happening right now, calm down, or I don't want to feel this way, please stop it, and your body will not necessarily listen because it has not gotten the information from your very basic part of your brain that we are safe now. It's getting the information from the basic part of your brain that we are not safe now. We have to be producing this response to keep us safe. And so in order to reduce that, you're going to have to like do stuff to like expose yourself to the feared thing, or even to the thing that's producing the response. Like even let's say like I said, for example, like maybe play that's a noise on purpose for yourself for like an hour straight. I know that sounds like impossibly painful, but that would actually probably help with that physiological response because it's training your brain. I would actually like even pair it potentially with like doing something very benign or even a little relaxing. Not, this is a little tricky though. You know what? Never mind. Too tricky to go into in this space. Never mind. Don't do anything while you're doing it. Just sit in one place with nothing else going on and listen to that noise. It would probably be the best way of reducing the intensity of that physiological response. Yeah, so a recording will be sent out to people on our mailing list. I'll put now in the, where do I put stuff? How does this work? I'm putting the link to sign up for our newsletter if you're not already on that list. That's how you can get access to the, yeah. Did that work? Do people see that? Can you, somebody send yes if you see that? Okay, well, uh, yes, fantastic. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. How do you carry your own fear while being their sense of safety? So that's what I was talking about before, that to a degree, a helpful, healthy, like appropriate amount of anxiety and stress, like differentiating those for a second there, is really helpful to talk out and model to your children how you're coping. Wow, I felt really nervous when I didn't know where that kid was. I felt really scared. That was like, whoa, that was a lot. I need like a second to like calm down. I'm going to take some calm breaths. Talking that out is so supremely, supremely valuable to your children. If you know that your amount is like really beyond, and you don't want to model that to your children because it's not a helpful, healthy amount, then I would just not talk about it. I would just try to maintain like calm as much as possible, um, while like actively working on reducing that. Okay. Okay. That's the questions I see. Any other questions that I'm missing if you want to ask about this topic? Oh, I feel like I said I was going to send out a handout. I mean, I'm going to send out I'll send out the blog post and the link to where the handouts are. There was a blog post I mentioned on emotion vitamins. Oh, great. There's another question that's really important. I'm just going to put in. So that's the link to the blog post about emotion vitamins. And then I'm also going to put in the link to our resources. So we've got a lot of lore related resources that go into some of these topics. Emotion vitamins handout is there, and also a book about, questions kids ask about sirens and how to answer those, and other related war topics, and hopefully a new book on war related questions coming soon, depending on how much, on how many other things going on. Yeah, so there's a lot of other helpful resources there that I recommend checking into. Okay, I see a couple more questions came in I want to answer. Somebody asked how to answer when they ask, why do they want to hurt us? So, second. So, okay, the first thing I would say when if a child asks, why do they want to hurt us? And this is, I think, an important that's the book that's fomenting in my head. That's what meant to address there. But when the first thing to address with that is that nobody wants to hurt you in particular. Nobody doesn't like you in particular. They're mad at the klal, and the most important reason is because that's why Hashem made the world. Hashem made it that people hate Klal Yisrael, and this is kind of like this playing out. And there's a bigger picture here. If they're a little bit older, they've learned any Chumash or Navi, you can connect the dots that way. If they're really young, I would just keep it simple of like part of Hashem loving us and making us His special nation is that people don't like us, and just keeping it simple like that. If they're older, you can talk more about those kinds of things. Or also, if you feel unclear yourself about Hashkafa around like Esav Soneas Yaakov and like end of days kinds of questions, say, you know what, I'm not sure. Can we like talk to our rabbi about this? Like, let's ask them, because that would be really empowering for the child that there, first of all, that there are answers. Second of all, that they can ask questions. And also that like they can form that kind of relationship where I can have a question, I can ask it, and I can like learn more, and it can be okay. So that's really helpful. But yeah, so I would keep it to like their level, but basically answers are going to have to be hashkafic to a degree. And then also taking away from like, nobody wants to hurt you. Nobody wants to hurt me. They want to hurt the Jewish people. So expanding it in that way, I think, helps to understand a little better, that this is like a little bigger than us. And like, yeah, that I think is like the most important point to make in terms of that. Um, Okay, the next question is, would you recommend playing the Hachra for a kid with autism and anxiety if that's what's really difficult for them? So I wouldn't recommend like, let's sit down and listen to this for an hour. This is going to be so dysregulating. I don't recommend this, that adults are doing this. I was making the joke before that I should do this and I don't want to, and I probably won't. Um, but just understand at least conceptually that's the direction we're headed in. So what you might do is like play something similar, or play something very, very, very quietly that's similar to it. Kind of just like giving things that are like similar so that we can have some opportunity to regulate a little bit to it, and be very, very explicit why, and only do it with permission. So explain to the child like it's so normal that this this such alarming noise keeps giving us this reaction. And that's one of the reasons why schools do drills, is because that a little bit teaches us what to do, so that even if we would, because we could just teach the students what to do in a drill in a case of an emergency, but we don't just do that. We actually go through the drill because it teaches us how to kind of respond in an emergency when we aren't able to think so clearly. So, would you want to practice a little bit so that your body doesn't have this such intense response? And so that's the direction I would go with that. And then I would really only do things with permission of the child, and brainstorm together with them what could be helpful. Yeah, and like everything should be very like consented to. Oh, my schedule of my family. That's the other thing I said I would send. I'll send that. Sorry, that's going to take me a second to pull it up. The next question I'm going to try to answer while I'm looking is, he's scared to go outside for fear there's going to be a warning on the way. Yeah, I think a lot of kids get scared of that. And so what I like to do is just to first ask the child, like, what are you scared of? Like, why are you scared of that? And then they'll say, well, then there'll be a siren. We're like, okay, so what would happen? Like, what would you do if there was a siren? First of all, like a lot of the time, there's a hatra before. Most of the time, we get a hatra before. If you're going on a 10-minute errand or a 5-minute errand, you're probably going to hear the hatra before you go. So very low likelihood you're going to miss it completely. You'll either hear it here or by the when you get to the place. But let's say there wasn't. Let's say there's no hatra, there's just an azaka. What would you do, right? And are you comfortable or okay with doing that? Found the schedule. Oh, does that work? I'm sending that. Just let me know if that worked. I feel like I feel like it did not work. Hmm, Sorry, I'm not sure why it's not like loading as a document like it would. If there's another way to send things. Hmm. What we can do is that I will send it together with the recording. Good idea. Okay, we'll do that. Um, okay, so I was answering, yeah. If the kid is scared to go outside, if there'll be a warning along the way, so you just play out with them, like, what are they scared of? Even let's say it's a kid who doesn't want to, like, we're all gonna go outside to play, and the kid says, I don't want to go outside. So they say, well, what are you scared of? Like, what are you worried about? Or just even starting with, why don't you want to go outside? And even if it seems totally obvious and logical to you why they don't want to go outside, play dumb. Why wouldn't you want to go outside? There might be a siren. Why would that be a problem? If there's a siren, we'll go back inside. Or even like, we're going to go to the park. If there's a siren while we're there, we're going to go across the street to the buildings, and we're going to stand in the stairwell with everybody else. And that's what we'll do. And so talk that out with them, because you might be surprised what they're actually afraid of. They might be surprised what they're actually afraid of. Like, they might be afraid of the sound of the siren. And talking that out might clarify that for them as well, that they do know what to do, and that this can be okay, and that this can be scary and intense, but it can be okay. And that's really, really important, is kind of empowering them to think through the whole thing, instead of what I find a lot of people do is just make the assumption that, like, of course you're scared, and of course it's too scary, and of course it's too much for you to handle. And that really communicates to the child, like, that anxiety is very, very necessary, instead of what we're trying to communicate to them, that anxiety is not necessary and you can absolutely handle this. Anxiety is understandable. This is a very important understanding with parenting children who tend anxious, is to consistently communicate that anxiety is understandable, but it's not necessary majority of the time. And like, I'm confident in your ability, I trust your ability, I believe in your ability to handle it. So giving children that, like, confidence to experience anxiety and do tough things anyway is really, really critical, while at the same time validating that their emotion is understandable. Um, Someone asked to say to a young child, Hashem is watching over you, or I'm watching over you, which is more calming. I think there has to be an understanding of both, that, like, I am your parent and I'm in charge of, like, if there's a siren, this is where we go, or this is what we do. And like, you don't have to decide that technical stuff. but at the same time hashkafically understanding that like there's something way bigger than all of us. Hashem is like watching over everything, and everything that happens for a reason, and Hashem loves us and wants something good for us. um, but also explaining on their level, and it's not all necessary and you don't have to get too deep. I think the most important thing is just for children to understand that they are not responsible for their own safety, if that makes sense. Okay, how to help a child and educate a child to regulate when the husband doesn't has anxiety and doesn't regulate. So that's tricky because it's not you. But as much as you can, like I said before, basically trying to hide the unhelpful part, and focus on the effective coping. You can also, like, you are not in charge of your spouse. You can't control them or control their responses. You can control your own responses, and so the more that you can share your own effective modeling is really, really, really valuable. So you can say things like, wow, I felt really nervous about that, and this is what I'm doing about it, or this is how I'm handling. The more you can share and demonstrate that, that would be probably the best thing. Adults are afraid of sirens also. However, kids also model how their parents react. And so if the parents are nervous and anxious, the kids will be. Yes, that's what we talked about in the beginning. That modeling is the most effective thing you can do in the positive way, and the most ineffective thing you can do in the reverse. And so if you are struggling with your own anxiety, first focusing on that is going to be the best intervention for your child. Um, how do I answer their questions when I don't fully understand what's happening either? If you mean you don't understand like what's happening like news wise, so you can say I don't know either, right? We don't know. That's okay. If it's hashkafic questions, I would direct those to somebody who is more qualified than you or me, because there are answers and we can get clarity, and empowering children that they can ask things like that is, and that they can get answers to that, is part of developing a healthy relationship with Yiddishkeit and with like hashkafa and like how the world works and things like that. Um, I want to model strength for them, but I feel like I need to find strength for myself. So that's what I was saying, starting up off with like, I'm saying it could sound like hooky pooky. I need to fill my own cup, blah, blah, blah. Or if do I even have a minute to fill my own cup? But even just start with the prescriptions I gave 100 times a day. It makes perfect sense that I feel so overwhelmed, so anxious. So whatever I'm feeling makes 100 million% sense. And then number two, congratulating yourself. I am handling amazing. I am doing amazing things for myself and for my family. I am just handling so beautifully. I'm just the most God-given gift to this universe, right? So filling yourself up that way can be very, very critical, even when there's no extra time for like a hot chocolate and a I don't know what spa day. So even if that's not possible, the best that we can do is still useful. And those are like kind of the critical pieces, I would say. Um, okay. My older kids used to scream when the alerts went off. Now they're much calmer about it. But my toddler screams out of real fear when he hears the alert and siren. How do I reverse this? Yeah, so with that young child, I would really like practice, like if a young child like that is having that reaction, I'm guessing they're picking up something from the environment, even if it's not you, it's from the other kids. And so I would just talk through, I would just say very calmly to the child, like, everything's okay. Now we're walking to the mamad or to the Khadir Mugan. Everything's okay. You're with Ima, you're with mommy. And just like talking that through and just like modeling a lot that like everything's really fine, is going to do a lot in terms of that. Um, that's what I would really focus on suggesting. Yeah, you wouldn't be able with a toddler that age to like to have a conversation about how they're feeling about it, but you can really teach them that like to kind of like to give them opportunities to learn that like you don't have to have that response, that response is really unnecessary, and it should die out pretty quickly. Not necessarily time number one, but like time number five, I would guess, depending on how frequent they are, but something like that. How do I make bedtime feel secure again? That's a great question. I would really try to stick to some kind of routine. So even if the routine is a little bit different these days, I would not let it be haphazard. I would still like try to stick to some kind of routines. Shema, pajamas, toothbrushes, I love you, snuggles, hamaka goel, whatever. Having a routine or reading a book together, whatever it is really, really helpful. And I would just like try to stay consistent with that routine as much as you can. My son covers his ears as soon as he starts hearing the siren and doesn't uncover until we convince him it's over. I know this is such a common reaction. I imagine it is really normal. But should I do something about it? Yeah, I would really just ask them like, what, like, why don't you want to hear the sound? Like, and then like kind of like with this just like confusion, like the sound is not dangerous. What are you afraid of by the sound? Why don't you want to hear the sound? Also every time the phone rings, the same child goes to check if it's a hatchery. Yeah. So I would again, I would ask like, why do you think it'd be a hatchery? You know what the sound is of a hatchery. You know it's not the same as the regular phone ring. So why would you think it's that? Right. So kind of like just confused and trying to like clarify with them, getting them to clarify that like this is not necessary. Because it could feel like it's really valid because everyone probably does on some level validate like okay like what are we supposed to do even if you're trying to like reassure them, they're probably picking up on that, that no, that like I really can't hear this sound. But like I was saying before about like validate, but validate the emotion, not the response, and give that vote of confidence that you can handle this. I totally know that you can handle hearing the sound. And I was like, ah, you can handle it. Like I know you can. Um, how do I talk about safety without teaching them the world is unsafe? Yeah, so I think this is a great question. It's talking about the concept of possible versus probable. So it is possible when a siren goes off that a rocket will hit an Eretz Yisrael. It is possible that it will hit a person and hurt them. And so therefore, that is why we're doing these things. But it's also not probable. And so we don't have to be terrified all the time, right? Most of the time, bad things don't happen. Most of the time, people are safe. Most of the time, people go to sleep and wake up in the morning. Most of the time, things are safe and okay. Sometimes they're not, and that's terrible. And that's the way Hashem created the world. And I don't necessarily understand fully why, but I have a lot of hunches. I have a lot of things that I've learned along the way, right? And I'm happy to share those things with you. But most of the time, things are okay. And you know that because, and then you list the examples of how they know that because everyone in your class is okay. Everyone in your family is okay. You don't know anybody who's hit by a rocket or things like that. Or, you know, or even if you know one person, this is very rare. Okay. Obviously to a degree, but meaning um, proving to the person how the difference between possible versus probable is really helpful. How do you feed and differentiate emotional hunger and being always hungry? Like, do you mean physically hungry versus emotionally hungry, like eating when you're not actually physically hungry? I think first of all, give yourself if that's the question, not please clarify, but if that's the question, first of all, validate that it's just an intense time. And so people are stressed and anxious. And when we feel uncomfortable feelings, we do a lot of things that are soothing, but not actually solving the problem. So some of us might do a lot of different things, right? But one of the things people might do is stress eat or eat from emotional place rather than a physical place. I don't think now is a great time to work on that per se. I think now is an okay time to like have grace with yourself. But the way to work on it would be to work on more like mindfully listening to the signals coming in from your body and recognizing when I'm feeling an emotion that it's safe and okay to feel emotions. Working separately, unrelated to food, on tolerance of uncomfortable emotions is really valuable and important. This is a really hard time to work on those things. So if you're in therapy already and you want to focus on those things, fantastic. If you are not and you don't have the emotional space or bandwidth to work on this right now, I would not be the first one to blame you. So go ahead and just take the time to cope the way you cope, as long as it's not dangerous. I would mostly just stick with that. That would be my response to that is yes, it's not fantastic. Yes, it is something that you can deal with and that I recommend that you do deal with, but not during like a major crisis. Is would be like my first thought. The thing that would help the most, in my opinion, would be stable and consistent meals. Having 3 meals a day or even 2 main meals a day can be very, very, very regulating for your system, and keep that kind of stuff at bay a little bit. How do we stay united in front of the kids if we cope differently? I think you can acknowledge that you cope differently, especially as kids get a little older, like even above the age of like 8. Kids can usually like understand that like different people cope differently, right? And that's okay. Like, like Abba can do that and Nima can do that, and that's okay. Um, yeah, like not having it be like me against him or me against her, that we're just different and different people are different and that's not wrong per se. Um, decisions, like not disagreeing with each other, is important. So you can do a lot of saying, like if mommy said so, if daddy said so, if Ima Abba said so, then that's what it is. Okay. I'm not, we're on the same team here. So that being clear, I think is important. Okay, that was the last question I see. So the recording of this will Bezrat Hashem come out to anybody who's on our email list. If you're not on our email list, the sign up link is the cbtdbtcenter.com/newsletter. And you can sign up there for our mailing list. We'll Bezrat Hashem send out the recording probably tomorrow, could be Motzei Shabbos. And Mir Hashem together with my family's daily schedule, and maybe I'll send a few other things that I thought or said I would send. And here I'll send it there as well. And Batzlacha. Everyone needs a lot of Batzlacha going through this. That is not bad or wrong. This is beautiful. This is fantastic. We are living in glorious times, going through amazing, amazing, incredible things. Zocha to have a front seat, and Zocha to be so incredibly held by Hashem and so incredibly safe while going through such an intense thing. And it is highly stressful and anxiety provoking. And so whatever way you're coping is for sure normal. And I hope that today gave you strategies of how to handle more effectively, how to communicate with your children more effectively. Yeah, that's feel good. Take care. Be safe. As if you could like control that. Good night.